Hi, everyone. Good to see you. I'm sure that many of you watching this are friends of mine. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kurt Carlson. I was the pastor of Summit View Covenant Church in Beaverton, Oregon for 12 years, planted that church in 1998. Before that, I was at First Covenant Church in Portland as the youth pastor and associate. From 2010 to 2015, I served on the conference staff as a director of church planting, and most recently I am in Mount Prospect, Illinois as the lead pastor at Northwest Covenant Church. My friend Greg Yee asked me to share some thoughts, some insights perhaps on the events that are unfolding in Ukraine and in Russia as well. It might be interesting to know that I have been doing a lot of ministry work in Russia since the year 2000, training pastors from all over the country, working with church planters in Russia, encouraging pastors, visiting their churches in villages and cities. I've also spent a fair amount of time in Ukraine over the years. Most notably, several years ago, a friend and I visited an evangelical seminary in Ukraine, in Kyiv. A friend of his had graduated from Gordon Conwell Seminary, and so we went and we spent a week at the seminary and visiting churches in Kyiv and the surrounding area, preaching, teaching, offering encouragement. It was a wonderful experience. My whole experience in Russia and Ukraine has been amazing. So amazing, in fact, that 5 years ago I married a woman from Russia. Some of you have met her,Elyona. She's from Volgograd, which is south of Moscow, formerly Stalingrad. So you know the history of Stalingrad and Second World War. My in-laws are both professors, as is my brother-in-law. My father-in-law was born in Ukraine. My mother-in-law was born in Russia. They met at the university in Moscow and they married, and this is a very common story. Ukrainians married to Russians, and millions of Ukrainians living in Russia and millions of Russians in Ukraine. For centuries, they've been brothers and sisters. The religion of Russia, if you will, the Orthodox Church, began in Kyiv, which was then part of the Russian Empire, before it was the Russian Empire. Anyway, you don't need a history lesson. My wife and her family and all of my friends and all of my wife's relatives and friends, regardless of generation or age, are heartbroken by what's happening in Ukraine and what's happening in Russia. No one expected this, as you heard on the news reports. The Ukrainians certainly didn't expect this invasion to happen. Most Russians didn't expect it to happen. And contrary to what you may hear, the vast majority of Russians are not supportive of this. The challenge is this, however, and my wife was saying this to me the other day. I was commenting on the brave protesters who are risking their life, who are risking being incarcerated for 15 years, who are risking having no employment in Russia for the rest of their lives if they're arrested for protesting. I was commenting about that, and she said, well, it's really an impressive thing. But most of my friends, she said, most of the people that I know aren't hopeful. We can protest, we can rise up against this, but we don't have any hope that anyone will listen to us. But we will continue to do it because this is wrong. I've had conversations with a few of my pastor friends in Russia. In the region of Russia that I've done most of my work in over the years is very close to the Ukrainian border. And so there has always been a lot of travel back and forth, and a lot of cooperation between the Russian churches, Protestant churches, and the Ukrainian Protestant churches. And so these are brothers and sisters that are being torn apart by this crisis. My question, like many of yours, is what can we do? What can we do besides pray? Well, first of all, I would say that prayer isn't the last resort, prayer is the first resort, so continue to pray. Pray for peace. As Ken Hagin said when quoting some Ukrainian pastor friend of his, pray for peace now. There's ways that you can respond financially. The Covenant, through our World Relief, Covenant World Relief, is receiving funds that will help with some of the humanitarian issues that are going on. As you know, the number of immigrants or the number of refugees that are pouring out of Ukraine is mind-boggling. They're expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 3 or 4 million people to leave that country. So pray, participate, give. And I would also say this, if you have connection with Ukrainian or Russian friends, people that you know, and perhaps people that you don't even know that well, offer a word of encouragement to them. And just know that, and I know most of you know this, but just because you're Russian doesn't mean that you support what's happening in Ukraine. And many Russian folks need our encouragement as well, because there's some pretty bad things happening, at least in the Chicago area, to Russians simply because they're Russian. And I won't go into all that, but it's not good. It's a very scary time. Pray for our country, pray for our leaders, that they would make good decisions on how to support and participate to help. But this is definitely a global crisis, and we need to pray. So I hope that something I've said is helpful, gives you some insight, perhaps encourages you to think differently or to pray differently. God bless you. I miss the Pacific Northwest. Hope to see some of you soon.